You might be thinking, look at that awesome new backdrop Natalie has that she also seems to be holding up. Well, it's not a new backdrop. It's a timpani head. LeAnn, 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 LeAnn. My percussion tech teacher gave them to us. Apparently they work well as sleds, but they also work as dry erase boards. So on the topic of timpani heads, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've decided that my side of this might potentially be taking a more musical approach. I didn't really think that long and hard about this. I am a music major and spend most of my time doing music, so it seemed like a good idea to incorporate that a little bit. Maybe covers and random facts about music, things that I happen to think of. For today's musical information, I'm going to recount to you the interesting tidbits of the Beethoven biography I recently read. Disclaimer, it is a long book and only sometimes interesting. Disclaimer number 2, I returned it to the library 2 weeks ago, so this is based on what I remember. So numbers and dates and stuff like that, not gonna be completely accurate. But close, I'm not just making this stuff up. Interesting Beethoven factoid number 1. In the 30-ish years he lived in Vienna, Beethoven moved around 70 times. That's twice a year. That's ridiculous. But despite all this moving around, Beethoven never left Vienna to go live somewhere else. At one point, he was fairly close to moving to London to work on some stuff. The British music people were really into him and were trying really hard to get him. They were going to give him some money, but it never happened. Beethoven spent most of his life in Vienna, the music capital of the world. Even though Beethoven had a relatively successful career, he still died impoverished. He was poor. He didn't have a lot of money. Part of this was due to the war. Did you know that Napoleon was actually attacking Austria while Beethoven was living there? Also, he somewhat forcefully adopted his nephew Karl when his brother died. Karl's mother, Beethoven's sister-in-law, was not happy with the arrangement. There was a lawsuit and there were a lot of legal issues with Karl. There's one anecdote about Beethoven that, I don't remember the composer, brought him a score for an orchestral piece he had written. Beethoven agreed to look through it. As he was looking through it, he was going super fast and this guy was just like, I didn't even think he was looking at the part. So the composer assumed Beethoven was not actually looking at the music. He was just patronizing him and flipping through it to appease him. Then Beethoven stopped, showed him a part in the bassoon that was not the best for the bassoon player. It was in a weird range or had a weird jump in it or something. Beethoven loved puns. They were all over his letters. He a lot of the time would make puns on people's names. Unfortunately, I don't speak German, so I didn't get any of them. My next point, not Beethoven related. Think about it. Puns cannot be translated. You can translate them, but then they don't make any sense anymore. One of the most well-known facts about Beethoven is that he went deaf. However, what a lot of people do not know is that he did not just wake up one morning completely deaf. It was a long and tedious process. It happened over 10 years, and his hearing would come and go. He would have good days and he would have bad days. And it's really unknown whether or not that was totally linked to the illness that eventually killed him. At that point, they had so many diseases anyway, it's not like you could tell. That's not in the book. Beethoven was a very emotional man, which you can definitely hear within his music, especially the stuff written in the later periods. At one point in his life, he wrote a letter to a friend talking about how he was essentially contemplating suicide. He was tired, he had been sick, his hearing was not doing very well at the time, and he was frustrated like a normal human being would be. It seemed unthinkable for me to leave the world forever before I had produced all that I had been called upon to produce. The gist of it is, I want to kill myself, but I can't because I still have music to write. That's so cool! Beethoven! He definitely revolutionized the world of instrumental music, and while some of the critics at the time did not fully appreciate his genius, there were definitely people who saw what he was doing and saw that he was changing the way that everything was done. Beethoven is considered to be somewhat a bridge between the classical and the romantic eras. He himself changed a lot in his lifetime as to how his music was composed. He always had a distinctive style. I think my sink's dripping, but I didn't turn it on, and there's no one else home. Well, that's probably enough about Beethoven. So, if you like music stuff, then cool. If not, I'll teach you some.